if there's one thing I got from this podcast is like a complete lesson of something that happened before the podcast, but gave it really like a nice wrap. And and it's quite amazing. When I was a student, the students were these young people who knew nothing, and the professors were all these people who had all the knowledge. Mm-hmm. That was my age of university. You would never think that you have anything to contribute to the professor. Let's say you would never think that you know more of the professor. You're gonna and things like that. Now, I mean, since I was in school, by the way, I don't want to tell people my age, but I was in school before Google, so, and that makes all the difference actually, because they have so much access to information. They're completely different people. Sure. It's not the same. So if the one thing I learned is like really a huge appreciation to my students. I'm actually looking forward to see what they have to say. I want them to say it. I'm going to learn from that. They would open my mind to other things. So I think the podcast was actually even make it stronger in the sense that, when you're in class, you're very limited in the discussion of, the topics you're talking about. And here it was very free. Yeah. So you could actually see their mind and how they think. I was like, oh, wow,
Wow. To this yearly wrap-up of the Future Economist podcast together with Dr. Yael Hadass, who is the academic head of economics at the double major BA degree of Business Administration and Economics at the Reichman University. Wow, it's been such a ride. You've recorded now about a dozen episodes of your brand new podcast, and this should serve kind of like as a wrap-up of this academic year, and I'm very excited. So first of all, how has it been for you?
It's been so much fun. I did not expect that it's going to be such fun, but because at first, when we thought about it, we said, okay, we need to sort of like bring the news that economics is interesting. Basically, That was my goal, because I have a problem that people always look at economics as something that is like so dull and boring and dry, and it's completely not. So I want to, attract more people to the field. But actually, it was fascinating to talk with people that sort of like people who are attracted to economics actually have a lot of very interesting things going on. So it was a great ride.
It was interesting. So, like at the beginning, you were a little bit like hesitant and like you didn't really know what to expect. But maybe how has your perspective changed like over the last, let's say, 6-7 months, like now publishing these videos? What is kind of like your impression that, like you say, like you're surprised to the most out of like, this podcast experience?
I think the best thing that happened is that I started to really understand how passionate are my students about learning. Mm-hmm. In a way, even when I see students, many times I see different sides of it. Like I could see, the stress before exams. Mm-hmm. I could see, sometimes, I try to involve students in discussions and, you have only few people participate. The honest truth is that many people who came to the podcast are those who participate. So it's a bit of not a representative sample, but still, it's really nice to see the fact that, young men and women are really eager to learn. That was the thing I felt all the time, that people are just excited about learning, excited about, interaction that is both social and educational and, I would say intellectual. Mm-hmm. And it was really, really fascinating to see it.
Wow, cool. So, like we've been connected, as a student teacher since almost a decade.
Yes.
Almost a decade, or even more already.
Yes.
And I got to know you a little bit about also like you like to talk, and probably one of the hardest thing as a moderator on this side of the table is, listening. So I'm very curious to know, when you look at this experience, what has been like very hard for you?
What was hard for me? I don't think it was that hard. At first I must say I was intimidated by the technology.
So we tried to take care of that.
It was like, it was like very intimidating, all the things that work or not work and whatever. At first I was very worried about, remembering the questions and so on. And it took me some time to sort of like feel comfortable just having a conversation and not, stick out to my notes so much. And and maybe you are right that I really like to talk, and all of a sudden I was in the listening mode, and I'm not used to that, especially not with my students, because normally I'm the talker and they're the listeners. So now it sort of went the other way, and I must say there's one saying that I always love in Hebrew. Let's say that from all my educators I've learned, but from my students I learned more. So that's how I felt.
Very interesting. So that's like really a first-hand experience to see when you have to listen to the students.
Maybe we should listen to them more. Maybe we should restructure the classes so they would talk all the time, and then we learn from them. And I don't know, but it's definitely a thought.
So you had a nice range of people, from corporates to students to deans and all kinds of people. What memory, which ones intrigued you the most?
All of them intrigued me. Let's start with that. Every podcast was whoa, okay, I didn't expect that. That's fascinating. I can tell you the two things I really enjoy was actually, it's funny because I look at my students and I look at the deans. And, for instance, Professor Edward Glaser was my thesis advisor at Harvard. And he was someone I learned from. And then Professor Zvi Eckstein was actually my master's thesis advisor when I was a master's student, and now he's my boss as the dean. And so these are two people who are I view as much more, I view their seniority and their knowledge. And it was very interesting to see how they see the profession. Basically, because one of the things that I think our profession has an awful PR is that nobody gets it, and the people who are really involved in the profession really do get it, and they both articulate it so beautifully that, for instance, Professor Ed Glaser said that, why do we teach people economics? What do we want them to do with it? And if you would talk with business professors, at least when I was in Harvard and I was taking classes in Harvard Business School, people talk all the time about money, how we can make more money and how we can be more rich and things like that. And economists do not think that. I mean, they value money, but the main thing is how do you help the world? How do you do good things for the world? And it was really interesting to hear both Professor Glaser articulate that, and Dean Eckstein, Professor Eckstein also did not say good things for the world, but he sort of exemplified, how you want to use policy and how important policy is in order to make better life to everybody.
So tell me, I listened to all of them from behind the scenes. So I took out a few of the quotes that I feel like it would be worthwhile to kind of reflect a little bit and hear your thoughts on that. So the first one is from one of the podcasts, one of your students, Sky Solomon. She wrote, education is like health. She said education
Sky
is
Solomon, yeah.
Yeah, she said it's education is like health and you should treat it that way. Very curious to know this. It was also a very fresh perspective, but also a very good quote, actually, coming from a student. What did you think about that when she said that?
I loved when she said that. We have to remember that we're talking about an 18-year-old person.
Yes.
It's amazing she said that, I think, because it's a very mature view, which is actually not only a mature view, it's actually something that is not fully accepted, in the sense that what she meant is that everybody deserves to have health and everybody deserves to have education. But if you look at the world, this is not the case. For instance, in the US, it always amazed me that you don't have universal health care. I come from Israel, and in Israel we do have universal health care. So it's even health is already, not clear that it should be available to everybody. And the fact that she articulated that, I thought it was really, really, sort of the fresh view of a person that was not, I would say, contaminated by interests. This is how the world should be. It should be in a situation that people have access to health and people have access to education, period. It doesn't matter where you were born, how rich are your parents, what kind of ability you were born with. You have to have access to these two things. I think she's absolutely right. I hope her generation will fix the world, because this is certainly not the case now. And even here, we are in a private university. The tuition is very high. There are bars to get in, and it's true, there are scholarships, there are all kinds of helps, but it's definitely not universal. So that was a really, groundbreaking quote.
Yes. And then, you talk basically to every student about this whole I would say, this one extreme of like what we had till, I would say, the beginning of 2020, where everything was face-to-face, and then this sudden change from all face-to-face to all remote, and now we have this like hybrid situation. What is kind of like your perspective now after you heard the students' opinions? Like, where do you think is it going now?
Amazing. I was really pleasantly surprised that we're not going to be all out of business.
So that's good. It's already worth it.
The biggest fear of all the teachers when we started recording was that we will become obsolete.
That was wow.
That was the biggest fear among the faculty that were discussing the fact that we are going to be recorded. Because it means that, we can just view the recordings. Why should they pay us all the time again and again and again? And that was a big issue, and who has the rights to that and all kind of things like that. And the one thing you learn from talking, I did not talk with everybody, I talked with only a sample, but if you see this sample as a representative of anything, it says that no recording would ever replace a human. That's the amazing thing that I learned, that, recordings are definitely helpful, and they're a very good sort of tool to, enhance learning or to make learning more accessible to people who cannot afford this human interaction in the fancy places. But nothing can replace human interaction. That's what I learned from my students. And not only from my students, Professor Glaser also talked about it. And this was actually a revelation. It's sort of like, it's not only a revelation in the sense of whether we would have a job, because I am definitely thinking that, the world always progresses. Some jobs become obsolete. You need to sort of reinvent, yourself or get more skills or whatever. Not that people are very happy about it after they, worked so hard to get PhDs and stuff, but that was not, by the way, my main worries. I did not allow myself to get freaked out by it, but I did think about it, and I actually pleasantly surprised to think that human interaction is part of education. You cannot just take it out of the system. It's the same thing like books. I actually mentioned that in one of the podcasts, is like, actually, you can learn everything from books. You do not need university. You can actually take all the textbooks, read it, solve all the problems that you know the material. But it's not enough, and nobody really do that. It's like you really do need the group to work with.
The social interaction. But it also shows again that like it's, to be a little bit polarizing maybe, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. Because I think like one of the very strong things of universities and their brands is who you get to meet in these places. So education is definitely one part, but the network might be even the stronger part that people lacked or felt the need for during this pandemic, that they said like, this is what I actually signed up for.
Yeah, well, I must tell you that I never felt it in this way. It's sort of like, you sort of like people think that, okay, I know all these persons and maybe they would help me get a job, or their parents would help me get a job. I don't know. I actually been teaching here for 10 years and I see the students as they are. Like, I don't really see the whole network and I don't see the whole thing. And I actually see that a lot of things getting done just by the fact that you bring here a lot of talented people and they work together. So the importance is not so much the network in terms of who they are and what kind of connection they can bring you. I think the importance is how talented they are. If you are with a lot of talented people, things will happen. People just, pave their way, they would, and that's the important thing. So the important thing is like sort of, you can think that about university that they cluster a lot of talented people. They make the choice who to admit and who not, based on all kind of metrics that you can argue about that as well.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if you have a lot of talented people together, things happen.
One of the episodes that you recorded was with Ernst Young. Very curious to hear kind of like your overall impression of like, how they recruit and like how they, look at your students and the future of work. What is kind of like your impressions that they left on you?
It was actually fascinating to hear what they need, because, sometimes we are in school and we have like all this curriculum, and that all kind of professors decided that students need to study, and you ask yourself whether it's applicable or not. And then they come and you see how applicable it is. You actually see, at least in our curriculum, and by the way, this is something that, they mentioned two things that are super important. That's the writing and the ability to think on your own and to research on your own. And these are exactly the things that Dean Eckstein put into the program in the third year, this policy paper process that, that's what we teach them throughout the whole year. At the end of the day, they finish the year and they have like this really serious research paper, and they have a lot of training on, like, you have English teacher and you have advisors of economics like me and my colleagues, and they have even an advisor of how to present it graphically for a poster. So I actually realized that we really prepare them well. I don't know if Dean Eckstein was aware of that or not. Maybe it was new only for me.
Sure.
But it was really fascinating. And another thing that was fascinating in that conversation was that they said that they are not looking for people who would be obedient and accepting instructions. They said that if these are the people, they don't want them. They want people who can think on their own, who can be entrepreneurs, who can actually bring new ideas to the table. That was fascinating, because in all this very, corporate world, I would imagine that obedience is still something that people appreciate.
Sure.
So it's actually nice to see that, there's so much freedom to think.
Right. Interesting. I mean, I recently saw an email that I guess was leaked from Elon Musk from Tesla. He said, if I give you an order, there's 3 options. Either you do it, number 2, you disagree and tell me why I'm wrong, or 3, you're fired. Which I guess falls into this category. Anyhow, so now after reflecting on your students' conversations, is there anything that you feel like, from your years of experience, and definitely, you're definitely far ahead in their life experience, do you think there's something that they haven't understood yet that you would say you wish they understand better?
I actually think if there's one thing I got from this podcast is a completeness of something that happened before the podcast, but gave it really a nice wrap. And and it's quite amazing. When I was a student, the students were these young people who knew nothing, and the professors were all these people who had all the knowledge. Mm-hmm. That was my age of university. You would never think that you have anything to contribute to the professor. Let's say you would never think that you know more of the professor. You're gonna and things like that. Now, I mean, since I was in school, by the way, I don't want to tell people my age, but I was in school before Google, and that makes all the difference actually, because they have so much access to information. They're completely different people. Sure. It's not the same. So if the one thing I learned is really a huge appreciation to my students. I'm actually looking forward to see what they have to say. I want them to say it. I'm going to learn from that. They would open my mind to other things. So I think the podcast was actually even make it stronger in the sense that, when you're in class, you're very limited in the discussion of, the topics you're talking about. And here it was very free. Yeah. So you could actually see their mind and how they think. I was like, oh, wow.
Wow. One of the topics that you discuss very often is kind of the role of women in economics, and how to maybe encourage or find women who are you want to be more into economics. What is it kind of that you experience now? What can be the reasons? What can be done in this topic? And
that's actually a very good question. So, as I said to one of our guests, I think first there's a history here that we sort of need that we are going through a social change. Mm-hmm. And we are now sort of in a part of it. We are only part of the way. The history is very simple. In the 50s, men were working, making the money, women were at home in the 50s of the previous century, 1950s. Because the men were making the money, they were making all the decisions, and women were considered to be not part of this whole thing. And that was a social sort of perception that changed when women started to work, and all of a sudden women started to make money, so now they can talk about money at least. But still, the sort of I would say hegemonia, how do you say, sort of the dominance of the male in this discussion was very, very strong. Mm-hmm. And for women, many times they were not talked about it with their parents. They were not talked while they were growing up. Nobody revealed to them anything. And men, on the other hand, were always considered to be the supporters. You have to make enough money for your family. I mean, I never heard about a man who were told otherwise. I heard about many women who were told, oh, you're only a second income, or you're only a supporter, you need to take care of the kids. So that's, I think, the history and origin of that. And the thing is, today, I don't think any woman can afford not knowing economics and not knowing at least personal finance. And women have to overcome this, very, very long history. Another thing I learned is that women are really afraid from men in terms of, being, thought as stupid. Like women.
When talk about economics or in general?
Well, I don't know. In general, I know I talk with them only in economics, so I can tell you only about economics. But my students told me, I ask women why they don't talk in class. Number one answer was, we don't want the guys to make fun of us. What? It's like so devastating. It's devastating that they feel that way, because I don't think any man that I would ask him, why we don't talk in class, he would say, I'm afraid from the women.
No, probably not.
Probably not. Maybe he would just be afraid. I don't know what he would be afraid from, but I don't think, sort of like that was number one
answer. If they show up.
Yeah. But anyway, and there have been experiments in the world that say, so for instance, that women study, let's say, sciences better when they are only women. In groups, they did all kind of experiments. There's a great TED talk. I always give my students to look at it, to hear it, watch it, and sort of like that young girls, if you put them in groups and you teach them STEM, they would know it very well. But if you put them in classes with men and they have all kind of anxieties or whatever, I don't know. I'm not a social, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know to explain it. I just said it's an observation that has been made by others, and I want to stop that. And I think the only way to stop that is to first be a role model, and have other women go into the field. There's no other way to.
So there shouldn't be any headline in the newspaper saying Dr. Yael Hadass recommends gender separation in economics.
No, I don't. Listen, it's something that I'm a member of a Facebook group called Ovrot Veshavot, which is an Israeli Facebook group. I think they have like 80,000 women there, that started for one reason. Women wanted to talk about money. Whenever they talked about money, men made fun of them on Facebook in other groups. So they started a women group only for that, so they can be safe talking about that. Now, I'm telling you, like, intellectually, I do not understand it. It's like sort of like you can say we don't want to be discriminated, and then you're like, it doesn't. But on the other hand, in practice, I'm a member of this group. There's a lot of talks about money. By the way, when the group become bigger, I noticed that some women are not being very kind to their other women. So it's not only a men thing. But I do not.
So they talk about what? Salaries and.
They talk about salaries, about insurance, pensions, investments, all kind of other, all kind of investment tools and taxes and all these things.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, to wrap up this. Episode, the wrap up of the wrap up. I have two more questions. Number one, what do you kind of like wish, for the next 10, 15 episodes of this podcast? What is it kind of like that keeps you going, that you say like, this is the kind of my motivation?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't had time to think about it yet. I had a very busy year with this podcast, but I think we will have to need to think about some new topics. Mm-hmm. I think we sort of covered a lot about, the education, for the future of education, the distant learning, all these things. And I think we probably should think about new topics to discuss with the students. I might involve the students and, ask
see what they want. Absolutely.
I don't have right now a clear idea exactly, but I think I'm going to involve, get some more voices in.
Very good. Dr. Yael Hadass, academic head of economics at the double major BA degree of business administration economics at the Reichman University. Thank you so much, first of all, for your courage to do it. Number two, for your humility and for exposing yourself to all of this technology. So thank you so much. I hope everybody who is listening and watching enjoys this upside down insights into the students' heads and deans and corporates. And now it's your turn to subscribe to this channel. And thank you so much for being part of this podcast. Make sure you subscribe. And if you want to know more about Dr. Yael Hadass, there's also episode 1 where you can learn all about her. And if you're interested in studying here at the Reichman University, make sure to check out the website. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next year and in the next video. Have a good day.